Hey everybody, Kimosabi here, giving you a video on money and what we think money is. I don't know that I'm going to do this video justice to get my ideas out there, but I'm going to give it a shot. So money, we think of money as, we're able to buy goods and services with this money, and we can make very, very direct connections to it just being debt. And these are the same things. You should see these as synonymous. Money and debt, because that's how all money is created. The common consensus that people think of when money is printed is that some treasury issues the money and pays it out to citizens or government expenditure. But what actually is happening is every dollar that is put into existence is brought forth with debt. When you go to the bank to get a mortgage for your home, debt is issued, and that is what actually creates the money. When you pay back that loan, it's destroyed. It brings the balance back to zero because everything has to stay in balance. So you have assets and liabilities, and they cancel each other out in this sense. So anytime that money is created, it's created through debt, and we're all chasing after this debt. To illustrate this further, kind of have a diagram here. Pay no attention to the words that are written all in here. I want this circle to represent our economy, basically our circular economy, where goods and services are provided and bought and sold on a daily basis. And then you have your government that issues your money slash debt. They issue this via the treasuries. The treasuries are then purchased via the banks, the secondary banks, and those then are purchased by the Federal Reserve up until about 2022, when the Federal Reserve stopped doing that. They stopped being the buyer of last resort. So in this circular economy, say you have a bank entity that is lending to you, for example, and you are then spending that debt on a house, and then that house is, you have to put repairs on it. Maybe you're spending more money, and whoever you purchased the house from is then buying their goods and services, and then they're depositing their money back in the bank, and then it goes round and round. And this is basically the debt that's just circulating in our economy, and we're all chasing around in circles. We're all chasing the same debt. And the government, they get in on the action, they push their debt. Because this circular economy, they're looking for debt. We're all chasing the debt, which creates demand for the government to put more debt into the system, which makes the money supply grow. Then they tax it back out. But their taxes, they don't even need your taxes. They'll just send this, and that destroys the debt that they issued. So they'll keep issuing debt into the economy that expands this bubble until it bursts, and then you have a deflationary event. But they can keep doing that as long as this thing runs in circles and everybody's still chasing the debt. So over time, the powers that be, or the government, has convinced everybody to use their debt as an instrument of payment to make the economy go around. It didn't used to always be like that. We used to have lawful money, but in this instance, we are just chasing after the debt. And that's what creates the demand for the U.S. treasuries. That's why people want the dollar, which is just a very short-term instant settlement treasury in effect. It really just represents the debt. Like on the $100 bill, this is a Federal Reserve note. But if you zoom in here, it says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. It's legal tender for debts. It's not legal tender for money. It's legal tender for debts. So this represents debt now. But zoom back 100 years, 1934 is when this bill was issued. At the bottom, we have will pay to the bearer on demand $100. And if you zoom into the fine print, it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or at any Federal Reserve Bank. which meant you could trade this in for lawful money, and lawful money being your gold and silver as written in the Constitution. So that's your actual money. This is a representation of that that says that you can get your gold or silver on demand. This new dollar, it does not state that. It states that you can run around in circles and collect the debt and pay other people in debt as long as people are willing to accept the debt as payment for goods and services. And it's a well-designed piece of paper. It looks very authentic. It looks very convincing. And you even got the guy on the front there. He looks like a sincere individual. It gives this debt note personality, and it makes us believe in it, that this is, you have the constitutional looking ink and feather pen to sign documents. It looks all very convincing and very legitimate. It legitimizes everything. It's very well designed, but it's designed with a purpose to make you feel confident in this piece of paper that no longer represents lawful money. It just represents debt, but it's all hidden by the bells and whistles they put on there. Sorry for the flashing white screen there, but this is a little article from Yahoo Finance that shows the national debt reaches 35 trillion. So that's a very, very large number. I mean, 35 trillion is just, we're getting into fantasy numbers now. You can't even fathom how big a trillion is. It's just a fake number in a fairy tale now. And it's just massive, unsurmountable. And then you have the money supply. The money supply is also going up. Now, this is an older chart. I want to say 2022, where we were up to 20 trillion on the money supply. It may have come down since then, but that's up there. So's the debt. So's the money supply. Well, let's put those charts together. And we will see the money supply represented by M2SL money stock on the trading view chart is in red, and the national debt is in blue. And the trajectory of both of them is very similar. They kind of overlap on the macro since 1966. They kind of work in tandem. So your money stock is working just like the national debt. They work in tandem. Your money is the debt. They're convincing you to use debt as money. And then a whole other can of worms where you represent the money, M2 money, the national debt comparison to the Dow Jones in black here. They all kind of move up the same way. And this is your inflation that is pushing up asset prices. It's not necessarily that these assets are going up in value, but it's more your currency that's getting devalued. And it seems to be accelerating. I mean, this is getting parabolic here on all fronts. So what happens when other countries or people around the world no longer believe in the fallacy of this debt being money? They realize that they've been kind of played along for years. Well, here's China that is selling off the U.S. Treasury debts. They don't want to hold it anymore. That's a significant sell-off. They're down almost 40%. Yeah, since 2012. They've been selling off the U.S. Debt notes because they no longer want to hold them. And they've actually been buying a lot of gold. Then we turn back to our circular economy where everybody's chasing this debt. And if our government is issuing the debt and this economy no longer believes that that debt has any value, well, then this government cannot print money anymore, basically. That is your money printer, is the issuance of debt. It's not really this guy standing up at a podium just slinging money out of the into the crowd. I mean, this is representative of what's going on, but you have to think of it all digitally. They can do this with the swipe of a keyboard, and the money just floods into the system. The liquidity floods into the system, and that liquidity has to go somewhere, and it often finds itself going into asset prices. So when you have a government like this that is flooding liquidity into the system at the same time that your population has money to spend, then you have the same amount of goods trying to get purchased by the population and the government at the same time, which then leads to inflation. That becomes very inflationary. But if your population doesn't have the ability to spend, then the government can spend all they want and there's no inflation. And the same thing with if your population has a lot of money to spend and they're spending money, then the government doesn't have as much of an ability to spend, i.e., print money. So the money printer doesn't come because your population has too much money. So many people are expecting the money printer to save the markets or whatever, or to prop up the economy. And that's not the way it works. They can't do it unless if you go hyperinflationary, which is a possibility. Certainly a possibility that the idea is to inflate the debt away as much as possible, but you're leading into hyperinflation and your currency's collapsing. Which brings you back to the debt bomb. So it all blows up. So what you thought was money is just a ticking time bomb in your face, ready to blow up. So essentially what I'm saying is for the money printer to start up again, you need to be broke, or the majority of people need to be broke and no longer spending money, or the banks need to be too worried to lend money into the economy. And that becomes very inflationary. And then the money printer comes by providing liquidity to those secondary banks, and then lending conditions can start to ease up, and then you can have money expansion. So what I have here is from the Federal Reserve chart or graph that kind of shows the debt and, well, the balance sheet, sort of, where you have the government that is indebted. This is their national debt, basically, how much they're spending. And up top, you can kind of consider this stuff in red as the money that is in your population. So the government goes into debt down here, and that provides a surplus to the population. So if you want to pay off your national debt and get that 35 trillion under control, that's going to reduce this blue part. And if you reduce this blue part, this red part over here is also going to meet itself in the middle. So that would be very deflationary because you're destroying your quote unquote money, and then you don't have money in your economy circulating, and that's deflationary, and you lead to GDP contraction or a recession or depression. But it's all money contraction. It's the contraction of your currency that you're using when the government is not issuing that debt, and then you're not getting the surplus in your economy, and they meet in the middle. And this thing tracked the economy pretty well. And this is your dot-com bubble right there. And this is your 2008 financial crisis. So there was a big expansion in money supply that helped the economy rebound and helped open up lending. And that lasted till about 2015 when the markets kind of went sideways from 2015 up until about 2019, like the S&P 500. Then you had your COVID crash and then massive money printing, and you had a bull market since then. So now we're just kind of waiting out the excess liquidity before asset prices could potentially come down, or this could expand, keep expanding, and then you get a surplus on the other side, and then asset prices go very inflationary again. It really just depends on which way they want to bring it. Either way, you're going to have movements in markets. You're going to have an expanding economy or a contracting economy. Which one do they do first? Because if this money supply kind of retracts in and you get a recession, what comes out of that is inflationary, most likely, because then they're going to start up the printer again. But that comes after the contraction. After the contraction, then you have the expansion. Contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. So you got to contract first. you did have a contraction here in 2022, and then you had a little expansion going in 2023, 2024. We'll see. But the main point of this chart is just to show when the money supply is growing, that gives extra money to your population so they feel richer. So the more indebted your government is, the richer the population becomes. So if you want to pay down the national debt, everybody's going to become poorer because there's less money in the system. Which brings me to the idea of the debt clock and the national debt. And we now have a Department of Government Efficiency clock that's showing how much money is being saved. Right there. 118 billion. $118 billion being saved. Okay, well, that savings means that your government is not spending that money. So this savings is taking money away from government spending, which is deflationary. It's making it so those extra units of currency are not getting out into the economy. So that ends up being deflationary, having a deflationary pressure on your economy. So now the idea is, what do we do with this savings? We could pay down the national debt, again, deflationary, and that could shrink the economy, or have the $5,000 stimmy checks. That would be very inflationary. So it's a conundrum. What do you do with that money? If you pay off your national debt, you're going deflationary pressures. If you give everybody $5,000, that's even more inflationary than the stimmy checks from 2020. Those were around $1,200 to maybe $2,000 total. So you want to double that? That would send asset prices and inflation roaring back again. Unless if they find a way, like I was thinking earlier today, and I posted on Twitter, the idea that they can contain the inflation by spending this savings, spending it into potentially the U.S. National Wealth Fund idea that they're floating, and that could just be buying up gold, Bitcoin, or putting it into the S&P 500 in an index fund, and just let it grow for the sovereign wealth fund. I'm not opposed to that, and that would contain the inflation to the markets and not necessarily your food prices or your gas prices. Or they could buy the gas. No, that'd be more inflationary. Yeah, that's the only thing I could think of to what to do with this money, is to localize the inflation in a certain asset, and that would do the least amount of damage short term. Or they pay off the national debt with it and pay that down a little bit, which is deflationary. I think if they give people money, I think that's going to send inflation out of control. Either way, it could, any which way you look at it, it's probably going to blow something up. Because once you start getting the deflationary pressures of paying off the national debt, that's a slippery slope, and that could start accelerating. So yeah, I think put it in some kind of asset that's going to be a good investment for the United States. That being the index funds, invest into U.S. companies. That works. Invest into gold just to hold your wealth. China seems to be buying plenty of gold, so hey, why not? Yeah, I guess it's up to them. We'll see which way they want to take it. The best we can do is watch the charts and see what they're telling us. But yeah, could be some wild times ahead in the next few months. Could have some very volatile markets. So I hope that was helpful. This is running on a 20-minute video. Nice little rant, but it kind of explains the money printer and why the money printer doesn't come immediately, and how to think about your money that you're chasing is actually just debt, and you need to get into real assets and start thinking about your long-term wealth in a different manner than these pieces of paper that they're pushing on us. Yeah, hope that was helpful. Have a great night, and keep them stops tight.